Let's be clear, wanting someone is not the same as needing to be chosen by them. You can want someone with your whole heart and still walk away if they can't meet you where you are. That's not weakness, that's strength, that's dignity. It's knowing that your value doesn't decrease just because someone else can't see it clearly. Think about how many times we shrink ourselves to fit into someone else's limited emotional space. We tone down our needs. We rewrite our texts 10 times so they don't sound too much. We accept crumbs and call it a meal, and when they pull away, we chase. Not because we're desperate for them, but because we're desperate for the version of ourselves we think we are when we're with them. But here's the truth. If someone only values you when you're easy, quiet, low maintenance, then they don't value you. They value their comfort, and you begging for their presence is just making it more convenient for them to give you less. That's not love. That's survival mode, masquerading as romancier romance. The irony is, the more you beg, the less attractive you become, not because you're not worthy, but because begging puts you in a position of need rather than power. When you start negotiating for someone's time or affection, you've already lost the leverage. The person on the other end isn't deciding if they want to love you. They're deciding how little they can give and still keep you around. Begging is a conversation killer. It says, I don't believe I'm enough on my own, so I'm asking you to tell me I am. But the moment you rely on someone else to write your worth for you, you hand them a pen they don't know how to use. Your worth isn't something people assign you. It's something you bring into the room with you. It's in how you hold yourself, how you speak, how you decide what you will and will not tolerate. And knowing your worth doesn't mean walking around with arrogance. It means having standards. It means being grounded enough to say, if you can't give me what I need, I'll give it to myself. That mindset is magnetic. It's powerful because it shifts the dynamic. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You're doing the choosing. You're not chasing, you're observing. You're not explaining your value, you're living it. And let's be honest, it's terrifying to stop begging. Because once you stop, there's silence. You're no longer distracting yourself with hope or illusion. You're sitting with the reality that someone you cared about may not care enough to step up. That's a hard truth, but it's also where the healing begins. It's where you start building the kind of self-respect that makes people rise to your level or walk away because they know they can't. You don't need to overperform to be loved. You don't need to chase, prove, or convince. You just need to show up fully as yourself and trust that the right people will see you, not for what you can give them or how easy you make their lives, but for the substance, the light, the presence that you bring. There's a quiet kind of confidence that comes with not begging. It's in the way you send one message and wait. It's in the way you don't chase people who leave. It's in the way you stop trying to resuscitate conversations that have flatlined. It's in how you let go of anyone who needs to be begged just to treat you right. The moment you stop begging, you make room for peace, for clarity, for better. Because what you tolerate teaches people how to treat you, and when you demand nothing, you often get exactly that. Let me know if you want the next keynote. No chasing you attract, not pursue, done in the same way. There's a pervasive idea in modern relationships that if you want something badly enough, you need to chase after it. The media, social trends, and even casual conversations reinforce this idea. If you want love, if you want attention, if you want to be desired, you have to go after it relentlessly. And while that may sound romantic in the movies, in real life, it's toxic. Chasing after someone not only diminishes your worth, it creates an uneven dynamic in the relationship where you're the one giving, reaching and pursuing, while the other person gets to sit back and decide whether or not they want to engage. But here's the truth, you don't have to chase anything that's meant for you. We often forget that attraction, genuine connection, and love are not things that need to be earned through constant effort or chase. Love, when it's real, is about alignment and mutual interest. It's about two people coming together because they want to, not because one of them has worked tirelessly to win the other over. Chasing forces you into a position of submission where you're constantly proving your worthiness, begging for recognition, and desperate for validation. It's exhausting, demeaning, and ultimately counterproductive. Let's start with the most important thing you need to understand. You cannot chase someone into loving you. Chasing doesn't make them love you any more than being constantly present in their life guarantees their affection. What chasing does is lower your own emotional value, creating an imbalance in the connection. The act of chasing, especially when it's one-sided, communicates a neediness that people subconsciously pick up on. And let's be real, neediness is never attractive. When you constantly chase someone, you're telling them that you're willing to settle for whatever scraps of attention they throw your way. You're saying, I'll take whatever I can get instead of holding out for something that honors you and your worth. This creates a situation where the person you're chasing has the power. They get to control when they give and when they withhold affection, and you're left constantly running after them, hoping they'll notice you and decide you're worthy. The moment you stop chasing, you stop giving away that power. You regain control of your own emotional well-being. You start to understand that the right person will recognize your value without you having to prove it over and over again. They will step up because they want to, not because you've pressured them to. Attraction isn't about proving your worth, it's about being who you are. When you're constantly chasing someone, you're essentially telling them that you believe they're more important than you. The chase becomes a mechanism through which you try to prove your value to someone else, like you're not good enough as you are. But that couldn't be further from the truth. You are already enough. You don't need to chase anyone or anything to prove that. The key to healthy attraction is being confident in yourself. When you're comfortable in your own skin, when you know who you are and what you deserve, you don't have to beg for someone's attention. You don't have to send 100 texts or wait by the phone, hoping that they'll text you back. The right person will want to be with you because they see you for who you truly are, not for who they can make you become. They will respect your time, appreciate your company, and invest in the relationship because they want to, not because they've been chased into doing it. Chasing is a distraction. When you're chasing someone, you're focusing all of your energy on someone who may or may not feel the same way about you. You're putting everything on the line, hoping for a result, and in the process, you're distracting yourself from what really matters: your own growth, your own happiness, your own life. You may start to notice that you've been so consumed with chasing after someone that you've neglected your own passions, your own friendships, and your own goals. You've invested so much time and energy into winning someone's affection that you've lost sight of who you were before the chase began. The irony is, when you stop chasing, you actually start attracting the kind of people who will value your time and effort without having to be pursued relentlessly. Attraction is magnetic. It's not about pushing or pulling someone toward you. It's about being so comfortable with who you are that people are naturally drawn to your energy. When you stop chasing, you free up space for the right people to come to you. This doesn't mean you sit back and wait forever, passive and inactive. It doesn't mean you avoid relationships altogether or never make the first move. What it means is that you stop exhausting yourself in an attempt to make someone see your worth. You stop overthinking every text, every phone call, every interaction, trying to figure out how to get them to like you or keep them interested. You allow things to unfold naturally because you trust that, in time, the right person will recognize your energy and be drawn to it. Chasing leads to insecurity. The longer you chase, the more insecure you become. You start to question yourself, wondering if you're not enough, if you're not attractive enough, if you're too much or too little. You begin to second-guess everything you do, every word you say, because it feels like you're constantly under the microscope of someone who may not even be fully invested. This insecurity only pushes the person you're chasing farther away, creating a toxic cycle where the more you try to prove your value, the less they want to engage with you. When you stop chasing, you step into your own power. You begin to live in a space where you don't need external validation to know that you're enough. Your confidence doesn't come from the approval of others, it comes from within. Attracting is effortless. The beauty of attraction is that it doesn't require effort, it requires authenticity. When you stop chasing and focus on becoming the best version of yourself, you naturally draw people to you. You stop trying to manipulate situations or force connections, and instead, you allow people to come into your life because they genuinely want to. The right people will gravitate toward you because they see your worth and want to share in your energy. When you stop chasing, you begin to respect your own time, energy, and emotional space. You value yourself enough to let go of anyone who doesn't treat you with the same level of respect and appreciation. You trust that the right relationships, whether they are friendships, partnerships, or otherwise, will naturally find their way into your life without the need for desperate pursuit. The person who is meant to be in your life will see you for who you are and will want to be with you, not because they were chased, but because they were drawn to your energy. Sage you can send. We live in an age where everything is immediate. A message is sent, and if you don't hear back within minutes, you begin to wonder, did I say something wrong? Or why haven't they responded? The pressure to respond quickly, to stay available at all hours, has created an unhealthy expectation of constant communication. But when we stop and really think about it, silence, especially when it's intentional, is often far more powerful than any message we could send. Silence is not passive. When you choose silence, it's not a sign of indifference or weakness. Silence is active, it's a choice. In relationships, we often feel the urge to keep the conversation going, to fill every quiet moment with words, to ensure that no one is left wondering. But silence, when used correctly, can be a form of self-respect. It speaks volumes without uttering a single word. The reality is, if someone isn't responding to you, there's a reason. Maybe they're busy, maybe they're not interested, maybe they're unsure. But whatever the reason is, constantly texting won't make them feel more inclined to respond. Instead, it might actually drive them further away. By texting endlessly, you're showing that you're willing to fill the silence because you're uncertain of where you stand. You're worried that without your constant effort, the connection will fade, but here's the thing. If the connection is worth it, it will not fade. It will not. If someone values you, they will reach out, they will respond, they will show up. Silence only becomes problematic when there's doubt on both sides. When you keep chasing through endless texts, you're not leaving space for the other person to step up and show their interest. You're taking all the emotional weight on yourself, and that imbalance isn't healthy for either person. Silence reflects your self-worth. We've all been there, waiting for a reply, sending a follow-up message, hoping for that simple acknowledgement. And yet, every time you find yourself doing this, you're subtly telling the other person that your time and emotional energy are not as valuable as theirs. When you are quick to fill the silence with more messages, you're giving up your power. You're lowering your standards and allowing your sense of self-worth to become dependent on whether someone responds to you or not. By contrast, choosing not to text is a clear signal that you are confident in your worth. You understand that if someone is genuinely interested, they will reach out to you. You don't need to chase them down or beg for their attention. The silence becomes a reflection of your boundaries, your ability to prioritize your own emotional well-being, and your refusal to settle for less than what you deserve. In many ways, the power of silence is in its simplicity. It's about being comfortable with the pause. It's about being okay with the fact that not every conversation needs to be a constant exchange of words. It's about knowing that you don't need to be on the receiving end of every conversation to feel valued. Silence is proof that you are not clinging to a relationship out of fear or insecurity, but rather you are letting things unfold naturally. It's a reminder that you don't need to text someone 10 times to prove that you're worth their time. Silence lets you assess the situation. Sometimes we get so caught up in the need for communication that we forget to step back and evaluate the situation. What does silence really mean? Is it a reflection of disinterest or simply a sign that someone is taking space? By choosing not to text, you allow yourself the time and space to think more clearly. You remove the pressure to constantly respond and instead allow yourself to assess how you truly feel about the situation. You give yourself permission to process your emotions without the influence of over-texting and unnecessary conversation. When we stop texting immediately, we give ourselves the chance to reflect. We ask ourselves, what does this person's silence mean to me? Does it bother me because I am insecure about the relationship, or is this just a sign that they need time and space? It's a chance to ground yourself in reality, to not jump to conclusions or overanalyze every little detail. Sometimes our need for constant communication is a mask for insecurity, and silence allows us to remove that mask and face the truth. In relationships, we often feel the compulsion to text because we are afraid of losing connection. But what happens when we stop texting and let things breathe? We often realize that silence doesn't mean the relationship is over or that the other person doesn't care. Sometimes it's simply a sign that people need time to themselves. And that's okay. True relationships can withstand periods of silence. They don't need to be constantly reinforced with messages. Silence gives them the space to come to you. One of the most powerful aspects of silence is that it allows the other person to step up if they care. If you're constantly texting someone who isn't engaging with you, all you're doing is giving them an opportunity to stay disengaged. They have no incentive to reach out because you're always filling the silence for them. But when you stop texting, you give the person the space to choose whether they want to continue the relationship. It becomes their decision, and in turn, their actions will speak louder than any text ever could. By stepping back, you create an emotional space where the other person has to make a choice. They can either reach out because they care, or they can let the silence stretch and let the connection fade away. Either way, you've given them the responsibility to show up, something that constantly texting never allows them to do. This space allows you to see who is truly invested in you and who is just drifting along. Silence is a form of self-respect. The truth is, texting constantly can sometimes come from a place of insecurity or fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being important enough. But silence comes from a place of strength. It's a decision to protect your emotional energy and to not waste it on someone who is not equally investing in the connection. It's a commitment to yourself that you won't chase after people who aren't showing you the same level of respect and care. When you stop texting and allow silence to speak, you are setting a boundary. You're saying, I will not overextend myself in a relationship where my efforts are not reciprocated. Silence becomes an act of self-preservation, a way of protecting your peace. Instead of desperately seeking validation through texts, you give yourself the opportunity to feel validated through your own actions by respecting your own time and emotional energy. Silence isn't the absence of communication, it's the presence of self-respect, and in that silence, you find peace. In the world of modern dating, it's easy to get caught up in the games. We've all been there, waiting for the right moment to text, wondering if we should play it cool, and trying to figure out how to appear less available so we don't seem too eager. The truth is, we've been taught to believe that the more mysterious or hard to get we are, the more attractive we become. But the reality is, playing games is draining, exhausting, and ultimately self-sabotaging. At the end of the day, it's only the real, authentic connections that hold any true value. When you play games in a relationship, whether it's waiting too long to reply to a text, using silence as a form of control, or pretending not to care about something that's important to you, what you're really doing is sabotaging the chance for a real connection to flourish. You're not only putting up walls between you and someone else, but you're also diminishing your own emotional integrity. Playing games creates uncertainty. One of the most damaging things games can do in a relationship is breed uncertainty. When you're constantly wondering if you should text first or whether they're playing it cool on purpose, you're trapped in a cycle of guessing. Every interaction becomes about who's doing more or less, who's showing more or less interest, and who's in control. What does this do to your sense of self? Anti-Semitic. It puts you in a position of doubt. You can't just be yourself because you're so consumed with trying to interpret the other person's behavior and figure out the rules of the game. The whole point of dating is to get to know someone and figure out if there's a genuine connection. But when you're playing games, you're not allowing that process to happen authentically. You're putting up a facade, pretending to be someone you're not, and it leaves both people in the dark about each other's true intentions and desires. This kind of uncertainty can lead to frustration, anxiety, and a feeling of emotional instability. In fact, it can even cause you to question whether the connection was ever real in the first place. If you're always second-guessing yourself and the other person, it's nearly impossible to build trust. And without trust, no meaningful relationship can exist. Games only delay real intimacy. Real intimacy doesn't come from clever tactics or mind games. It comes from vulnerability, honesty, and open communication. But when you're playing games, you're actively blocking that kind of connection. You're putting up walls and hiding behind strategies that prevent both people from truly seeing each other. You're keeping your real self tucked away because you're worried that revealing it might make you too vulnerable, too exposed, too much. But here's the truth. The moment you stop playing games, you open the door for real intimacy to flow in. When you stop pretending, when you stop trying to impress and instead just let yourself be, you allow the other person to do the same. True emotional closeness happens when you're both able to be real, without the pressure of competing for attention or affection. When you are authentic, you attract people who can love you for who you are, not for who you're pretending to be. Playing games can give you short-term attention, but it will never give you the kind of connection that you really want. Games may get you the date, but they won't give you the relationship. If you're looking for a real, lasting connection, then the only way to get there is by being real from the start. Games are a sign of insecurity. At the heart of playing games is often a deep sense of insecurity. If you're constantly holding back or pretending not to care, it's because you're afraid of being vulnerable. You're worried that if you show too much interest, the other person will think you're desperate or needy. You're concerned that if you're too honest or open, they might not feel the same way. But here's the irony. Games are a clear sign of insecurity. If you were truly confident in yourself and in your worth, you wouldn't feel the need to play games. You wouldn't feel the need to manipulate or attest to the other person to see if they care. You would trust that if someone is genuinely interested in you, they will show it, and if they're not, then they're not the right person for you. When you play games, you're essentially hiding behind a mask. You're afraid to show your true self because you fear rejection or disappointment. But what you don't realize is that playing games only perpetuates the cycle of insecurity. You're not giving yourself the opportunity to truly be loved for who you are, because you're constantly worried about what the other person thinks. Confidence, on the other hand, comes from being comfortable with who you are, flaws and all. It means being able to put yourself out there without fear of judgment. It means knowing that you are worthy of love and respect, regardless of whether or not someone else reciprocates your feelings. Games create emotional distance. One of the most damaging effects of playing games is that it creates emotional distance. When you're constantly trying to outsmart the other person or gauge their interest based on how long they take to respond to a message, you're not building a connection, you're creating a wall. You're allowing the emotional gap between the two of you to grow wider with each game you play. True connection comes from emotional vulnerability. It comes from being open, from letting the other person see the real you, the messy, imperfect, and authentic version of yourself. But when you're playing games, you're holding back. You're afraid to be real because you think it might make you too vulnerable. The more you play games, the further apart you drift. Emotional distance starts to form, and before you know it, you're not just playing games, you're emotionally disconnected from the person you're trying to connect with or trying to connect with. And what happens when emotional distance grows? It's almost impossible to bridge it. The relationship starts to feel shallow, like you're both just going through the motions, pretending to care when neither of you is truly engaged. Being real takes courage. Let's be clear. Being real requires courage. It means showing up as yourself without pretense and being vulnerable enough to share your true feelings, desires, and fears. It means putting aside the masks and the games, even though it's tempting to hide behind them. But here's the thing. When you choose to be real, you're not only showing courage, you're showing respect for yourself. You're respecting your own emotions and needs by refusing to play the game. You're choosing authenticity over manipulation. And that's where the magic happens. When both people in a relationship are willing to be open, honest, and real, that's when the connection becomes deep, meaningful, and lasting. That's when trust is built. Because there's no guessing, no wondering where you stand. You both know that the person standing before you is the real deal. And that's the foundation of something solid. Playing games is a waste of time, energy, and emotional resources. But being real, that's what makes relationships thrive. So when it comes down to it, be real or be gone. Because if you're not willing to show up as yourself, then there's no point in pretending. You deserve more than just a game. You deserve authenticity, and anything less isn't worth your time.